Hi there, and welcome to the US Web Design System monthly call for the first monthly call of the new year, January 2021. So my name is Dan Williams, and I'm the USWDS product lead. Thanks for being here as we get started in a new year. We're ready to kick off 2021 with a user experience focus. First, I'd like to mention that we're recording this monthly call, and as always, we post these recordings to YouTube. So please refrain from turning on your camera. We'll manually turn off any cameras to ensure that the recording doesn't show us on camera, unless you're a presenter, in which case, please be on camera. We'll be posting links and references into the chat as we go along, and I encourage you to ask questions in the chat at any time. If any member of our team can answer your question in the chat, we'll try to do so. Otherwise, there'll be some time for question and answer at the end of the show. Also, be sure to introduce yourself in the chat as well. It's nice to know who's here, and it's good to have you here today. With that, let's get started. We've got a useful and engaging show planned, and we're trying something a little different today by leading with the main presentation. So we are going to start with an introduction to journey mapping and service blueprints, what they are and how they can help teams better understand their users. And then we'll check in with a couple new site launches and give a couple quick product updates. And if all goes well, and it will, we should have plenty of time for questions and answers at the end. Remember, as I said, you can always ask questions in the chat as we go along. So without any further ado, let's get this going. So today, we're going to spend some time talking about journey mapping and service blueprints. And for this, I would like to welcome my colleague, Norah Maki. She's a design strategist with 18F and with us here at the US Web Design System. We're lucky to have her, and we're lucky to have her here today talking with you. Norah.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, everyone, for being here. Excited to be talking with you all about journey maps. Let me just pull up our presentation and we'll get started. All right, so here we go. So here's the too long didn't read version of today's presentation. 3 key takeaways for you all. First is people's experiences with our digital services are complex and often more complex than we might imagine. So one way we can start to get insights into those experiences are 2 methods that we'll talk about today: journey maps and service blueprints, which are research driven, they're related to each other, and they help us understand what the user is doing and ways to improve that experience. And the last thing I really want everyone to take away is that these are really flexible tools that can help us align our website development to principles, increase maturity over time. And because they're flexible and there's a lot of ways to use them, instead of going deep on a single example today, we've tried to bring in a wide range of examples to get the wheels turning on how you can start to use these methods in your work. And to help with that, we have a few wonderful guest presenters who are going to be popping in to speak to specific examples, and I'll introduce them as we go along. So the design system consists of principles, guidance, and code, right? And these principles are the ways that we want to orient our work, right? There are different views into our priorities, different ways to think about what we want to drive toward. But since they're a little abstract, we try to ground them in more tactical approaches that work in service of these principles. And so journey maps and service blueprints are 2 such methods. And while they support all of these, they're particularly strongly connected to the ones that are highlighted a little bit in blue there. Understanding those user needs, promoting continuity of experience, and listening to our users on a regular basis. So when designing digital services, we tend to spend a lot of time on the front stage part of this diagram, right? Thinking about our user interface, our content, our components, what it is that people are seeing. And today we want to take a step back and think about how can we bring what's happening on either side of that, the experience of the audience, as well as all of these backstage systems and processes, into our work more systematically. And so journey maps and service blueprints are two methods that help us do that. And the field of service design actually borrows a lot of language from theater, including this front stage, backstage concept. So what is a journey? We've all seen journey maps, but what do we mean when we say a journey, and how do we know when a journey starts and ends? Journeys are nested experiences, right? Each journey is part of a bigger journey going up to your whole life and the whole world, right? You can expand pretty much forever. And so we want to think about what are the bounds of the journey that we're designing for. And this is an example that I often use, right? Your macro level journey, a mother-to-be experiences this journey of having a baby. And there's all sorts of things that are part of that, all sorts of people and services and experiences. And then within that, you have individual service level journeys, like getting healthcare from your healthcare provider. And so that's, the cadence of appointments and the information that mothers need at different stages of the process, and how do they get their test results, and who are the medical professionals that they're interacting with. And all of those things together comprise this service journey of getting care. And then within that, you might even have smaller journeys and interactions, such as when the baby is born, there's a small window of time to add that baby to your health insurance. And so there you might be going online to your health insurance company's website to change your health insurance. And that in itself is one little journey and an experience that's provided by your health insurance company, right, who maintains that website. And so the first step is figuring out what is the start and end of our journey, and what other services or journeys might that be a part of. And even when we can only influence part of the experience or part of the journey, it's good to be aware of what's happening at these other Zoom levels and design with that in mind. And that's really what we mean when we say a service mindset, right? Is thinking about how these things ladder into each other. And so to talk about this a little bit more and share some examples of thinking at these different Zoom levels, I'm going to hand it to Aaron Stienstra, who's a senior design strategist with the GSA Office of Customer Experience. Over to you, Aaron.
Hi, everybody. My name is Aaron Stienstra. Good to be on with you. I'm going to chat about some cross-agency maps. So if you want to go on to the next slide. So I'm going to chat about some cross-agency maps that are on the complex end. That doesn't necessarily make them better or more valuable. It just means that they are different. And some of them can be simple and some of them can be complex, and they can all be good. So most of the maps that I'm going to share today are work that I've done with the cross-agency CAP goal team from OMB, the customer experience CAP goal team. And we've worked under the premise that people have different experiences. Some of them can be quite complex and span multiple agencies and multiple services. And we wanted to understand like how those, what those look like from the user's point of view, so that we can think about them holistically and like work to improve them, very much like a service design mindset. And so that's what we've done through these maps. So the first one that we've done here was with the veterans employment. And we wanted to understand the veterans' point of view of trying to navigate getting jobs after service, which is complex, and it spans multiple agencies from VA to DOD, Department of Labor, Small Business Administration, Department of Education. They're all working together to help this particular person navigate different services after they finish service. And the one thing that you see here is like it's a journey map, but it has multiple parts to it. And we wanted it to be like very like self-contained for different audiences, whether it was like a person who knows about this particular journey or somebody that's totally new to it and totally new to journey map. And so we wanted to include information about like, what are journey maps and what was this pilot all about, and how do you read it, and like why is it valid, and why it's different from statistics and so forth. So we included that up at the top, and then we also included information about demographics of the people that we spoke to, different veterans and subject matter experts, and also a little bit of information about transition in general. So some of the other things that you're seeing here, number 2, if you can follow along the numbers there, those are the kind of the key steps in the process, those circles along the top. Going down from there, these were like these key transition blocks, these building blocks that veterans utilize to help them navigate this journey. And then below that are these the blockers, the things that impeded them from successfully navigating this journey. And then below that are the different federal agency supports that align with like these different steps in the process. So, and then, what we did sort of, going through this at the end after doing this journey mapping was to kind of capture our findings and opportunities, and that's in what number 7 is. And we included them in the map itself so you could see that in a comprehensive way. And so we came up with 6 themes, which included some quotes, some notable quotes from the research, in addition to some how might we statements to kick off kind of a design phase of this. And one of these was actually picked up as a kind of a framing statement. And we ended up doing some workshopping with the agencies involved afterwards. And it actually led to Department of Labor sponsoring a $1 million challenge competition to build a digital product that does better matchmaking between veterans and the employers who want to hire them. And that was actually went through a process to review and select a person to build a product, and that's in the process of being delivered. So this was our pilot project. It was really exciting to work on. Nora, if you want to go to the next slide, please. And our thesis after sort of doing that map was that people have life experiences, and not experiences like with government. And so government should think about people having the life experiences and not like just single transactional or agency experiences that, for a veteran trying to get a job, like it's not just, what can VA do or what can labor do? It's more of like, they're using all of those things, but they're also using like LinkedIn, and they're going to friends to say, how did you get a job? And it's multifaceted. So we wanted to think about like, wow, like that people have a lot of life experiences. Like, what's the next one we should look at, or how should we think about this? And so this wasn't based in any research. This was just sort of like doing a scatter shot of like from the time somebody's, born to the time they die. They have a lot of experiences that intersect with the federal government, whether it's taking the census, getting a passport, visiting a national park, surviving a disaster, or navigating life with a disability. There's all kinds of these intersection points, and where are they, and like where could we learn more about them? And so we included 2, 3, and 4 here are just a little bit of like cataloging what some of those services are and what some of those interactions are. If you'd like to go to the next slide, please, Nora. So after a period of time this summer, we actually decided to do 2 more cross-agency maps at the same time. No short of ambition on this CX CAP goal team. And we also, at the same time, developed some strategy documents as well to kind of set up the future of customer experience in the federal government. So we did these 3 projects at the same time. And the 2 cross-agency mapping projects that we did were a person with an intellectual disability navigating services and a person surviving a natural disaster. And so what you see here is the journey map that we created from the person navigating with an intellectual disability, which also includes their caregivers as well. And so a little bit of the anatomy of this map that you see is, we have, number 1, we have the key stages, which were childhood, ranging to kind of moving through the educational experience and into adulthood. And the moments that matter here which included, as much themes and like mindsets as they are like single particular like moments. And following that below, we have these actions that this particular person or persona would take during this process. And I should mention here that all of these maps that you're seeing, and I should have mentioned this earlier with the Veterans Journey Map, is that it's a journey map that is a composite of the people that we spoke with. It's not a single person or a single persona, where you might do if you were just saying like, how does a 20-year-old navigate a website to learn about which cell phone to buy, which is a very kind of small journey in a single person. We're trying to group people into a composite and to capture that. So you also see an undulating line, which you typically see in maps that allude to the ups and downs that person experiences during the journey. And the red dots that you see on that line are these like key focal point areas that we decided to zoom in on and to really look at like where these government and external supports kind of come together in this like cross-agency way. And not just cross federal agencies, but also including state and local services as well. And the thing that we wanted to illustrate here was that, there's a real burden on individuals and families to like braid together services and supports during these moments on this journey. And that's really hard to do. And it's not enough for us as the federal government to say, how can we just improve this one service that we provide, but we have to think about it in conjunction with other ones and the challenge that it is for people to do that on their own during that time. So, and then following below here, we have these cross-agency challenge areas that included some quotes from the research as well. And they include the challenges that we note here were also very similar to the ones we had in the following map. So if you want to move to the next one, Nora. The map itself we designed it as a PDF document instead of a printed map, which is what we did for the veterans map. Given this time of all virtual, we designed it as a tabloid-sized PDF document that included 2 other pages of content that again could be packaged such that like whether somebody knew about this particular journey in these personas or not, or this subject, could like pick it up and understand like, why was this project done? What is a journey map? Who did we speak with? Like, why is it relevant to be looking at this journey? And so we wanted to include that all, within these 3 pages. And so on page 1 is a little bit of the introduction, and then page 2, which you can see with these like small little illustrations of people we decided to include some personas that represent different people that we spoke with in the research. We did that because their stories are really compelling and moving, and really kind of build empathy for us as both researchers, but also such that we could like share with other agency leaders and folks that we are going to talk about this project with. We did a similar exercise with the Veterans Journey Map, and we found that often people were as interested or more interested in the stories themselves than the actual map. So we included some of those stories here. And if you want to go into the next slide, please, Nora. And then lastly, this was the disaster survivor map that we did, another cross-agency map where we spoke with people who had survived a disaster and also subject matter experts from different agencies. So it has a lot of the same constituent parts, the stages, the moments that matter, different actions, and the different supports. The piece that you'll see that is quite different is the illustration. We again did sort of a zoom out of a particular focal point, and we wanted to show that in this instance, at a time of like crisis and at a time of stress, a person is having to navigate these different like loops of process in order to like move forward or to get what they need. And often they have to have these feedback loops that link up for example, FEMA and the Small Business Administration if you're a business owner, or navigating your insurance at the same time as navigating FEMA, and at the same time, you're interacting with charities and nonprofits to get support. And I mean, this would be hard for anyone at any time to do this much, but imagine that you've lost your house and you're trying to do this. So this is where we as a federal government can do better to understand that people are going through all of these things at one time, and how can we create better kind of experiences for them as they try to navigate that. And then again, these cross-agency challenges were similar to the ones that we found with the person navigating with intellectual disability. And then just to close out, a few things that are kind of key learnings for us are that, people experience life and not government, and start with that premise. Include stakeholders in the process of doing these maps, and sharing these maps and doing workshops afterwards. And I think the key thing beyond just outlining like what are the different services and how they work and what the process is, like these really like build empathy for the people in which we're depicting here. And that is important for taking action later from these maps. These are not solutions in themselves, but they do facilitate thinking about addressing the challenges and pain points that are in them. And I'll stop there and pass it on, and happy to answer questions later on in the Q&A.
Great. Thanks so much, Aaron. And I think these examples really are so effective at starting to show that range of flexibility of the different type of information that you can include based on what the goals of the work are, with those overarching goals of building empathy, of engaging people in the process. So with that in mind, we start to think about, okay, so there's all these different ways to think about what the scope of a journey is. And if we're designing for life, right? not for government services, how do we scope a journey? And so we've put together here a few questions that you can ask yourselves at the start of a process to figure out how do you scope appropriately for the work that you need to do and the resources you have. And remember that it's okay to start small and expand as you learn more. So in the interest of starting small, we're going to start with some of the fundamentals. What should you include, and what are the different ways that you can expand, building on what we just saw in some of the examples? So today we're talking about both journey maps and service blueprints, which we can think of as sort of different views into a user experience. So I like to think of a journey map as building out a rich understanding of the audience and their experience. If we come back to this diagram of the stage, right, is what is the story with this audience? Where did they buy their tickets? How did they get to the theater? What are they seeing when they sit in different parts of the auditorium? What are they thinking as they sit there in their seats? Well, a service blueprint expands on the audience journey by building out a really rich understanding of all the processes that go into creating that user experience. So you have the people running the lights and the sound during the show, but you also have all of the administrative processes that make that happen, like communications, ticket sales, planning, rehearsals, everything else that goes into that. And both start in the same place. By describing in detail the actions that a user takes to achieve their goals. And ideally also lays out some quantitative baseline data for each of those actions. So you're trying to answer questions like what happens next, how many, and how much. And we've laid out a few prompts there. And this step of user actions and the baseline data is really the backbone for your map, whatever you choose to do. And then to this backbone, we can start adding layers of information to tell a richer and more complex story. So those can be more detailed information looking outward, so looking out towards your users and their experience, or it can be more detailed inward-looking information, thinking about the organizational structures and processes that go into creating that experience. So what can those layers consist of? We saw a bunch of examples from Aaron just now, and I'll just lay out a few that are frequently used here. So in a journey map, when you want to add more detail about the user experience, some things to consider are context. Where is the user when they're using your product or service? Are they home? Are they in a government office? Are they out in a national park where they have really limited service? What is their mindset? What are they thinking and feeling? Is this a high stress, high anxiety moment, like they're in an emergency situation? Are they coming here out of curiosity? Are they here as part of a education curriculum or something else? What is their mindset, and where are they getting stuck or feeling frustrated? And to give you an example, this is an in-progress journey map that the design system team is actually working on currently, coming out of a recent research effort to better understand the needs of agencies that use the design system. So we're using this journey map to understand where folks need more support as they use the design system. So we've included layers of information like what channels are folks interacting with at each step? Are they in Slack? Are they coming to our monthly calls? Are they on an email listserv? Where are they coming for different kinds of information? What are their goals at each step? And where are they running into those frustrations and challenges? And so we're using this along with other research artifacts to guide our 2021 road mapping. And we'll share more on that in the next monthly call. So with a service blueprint, we're looking inward. And that's because improving a service usually requires some level of process re-engineering or organizational redesign. So we want to look at what we call the front stage actions. So what are you doing that a user is directly interacting with? This is your website, your chatbots, your customer service phone line and call centers, your help desk. And then we want to look at the things behind that, the backstage, what's not readily visible to your user, which could be things like your database architecture or the way that your team is set up and runs your agile sprints. And then the support processes is sort of the underlying layer that supports all of that. Things like your infrastructure, your contracting, your planning and budgeting, federal policies, those things that are really shaping what else is possible around all of your service design and delivery. So to share an example here, I think we might have Jacklynn Pham on the line. I want to hand it to her to share an example. Jacklynn's a designer at 18F. Jacklynn, are you with us?
Yeah, hello.
Hello. Over to you.
Just give you a little context before we jump into the slides. So our team was working with the Department of Justice on a new process for submitting civil rights complaints. This was over 2 years ago during the research phase, and we were actually bringing it together 10 teams within the Department of Justice who previously had their own process. So the internal team had made a more typical looking user journey map or blueprint like Nora had shown. But for the purpose of our discussion, we narrowed into one single layer to have this discussion with those 10 groups. And we shared a high level process among the teams so that they could see how a public complaint goes through the agency and how they all work together. So this is the slides that are about to be shared are kind of like in the middle of this journey. You go to the next slide. So imagine the first stage is intake. A public person will submit a complaint and it'll either go to ADM, which is kind of the mailroom or the default place where all complaints go to. And there are some cases where it might go to that individual team or section it's called in the agency. So if it's something about voting rights or disability rights and someone new to write to that department, it might go to that section. And then you see this blue part where I kind of annotated the experience as well, so that when I was talking through, they kind of knew what point I was trying to make. Go to the next slide. And so say that we're focusing on ADM, that one team, they'll receive the complaint, they have to log it into their own system, which is different than the other systems the sections are using. And then the next slide. And once they review it, then they can route it to the section in which case the section would kick off their own review and process. And so these are just the 3 slides that we pulled out from this presentation, but I just wanted to point out how our team treated this user journey, because the stakeholders weren't as heavily involved in discussion, so we broke it up into animated slides so that they could walk through the process themselves. And it kind of brings back that storytelling aspect of this larger journey where the public is involved and how they fit into the experience. So as a presenter, kind of breaking up the bigger blueprint for folks. And then later we would add in the layers like technology, how it's used and how it affects the process overall, or some of the other layers that Norah talked about as well. I'll pass it back to Norah.
Awesome, thanks, Jacklynn. I love this as an example of like the storytelling aspect of sharing this work out with other stakeholders. And with that in mind, let's think about how do we start to put this into practice. So those fundamentals that we've talked about, that backbone, and then the layers of information, right? You can make this at any step of the process. So you can do it before, during, and after research. So before research, you want to, you want to just start by documenting what it is that you know already about the service or the journey. And this can be done in a really low fidelity way. I want to emphasize what both Aaron and Jacklynn said about doing it collaboratively, doing this process with other people from your team or other teams in your division. Is infinitely more valuable than having one person who's responsible for making the map, because the process of bringing all those perspectives together is what really generates the value and the insights. So get whatever you can out on paper, and then you'll start to see where there are some gaps, and those gaps can be used to help formulate your research plan, figure out what it is that you need to learn, and even advocate with leadership for being able to do that research or being able to bring in other colleagues whose work connects into this service. And then during research, you're learning what you need to learn to fill in those gaps in the journey. And you can also engage participants more actively around these artifacts. So you can ask participants to draw their own journey, as you see here, another maternal health example of a mother going to seek medical care close to her delivery date. You get all this like lovely, rich information from people when they draw their own journeys. And you can even share your draft journey map with users and have them contribute into it or respond to what's there and form it collectively through that process. And then after research, you're pulling in all of your findings to make a more complete artifact, whether that's a single document that captures everything, or whether it's more of that storytelling format that Jacklynn shared. You can figure out what format is best for your project. But this is where you've done the research, you have the actual information and insights here that you can use to socialize with your team and help move forward with your next steps. So what are those next steps? You've got a journey map now. Now what do you do with it? You've spent all this time doing research and making this. Don't stick it away in a folder somewhere. There's a million ways to keep using it. So we're going to talk through a few of those and then share an example. You can use it for prioritization and planning. It can help you figure out where to start with a large effort. So if you have a really large journey or a really large modernization effort, you can say, all right, we're going to start with this piece. Let's solve for this step of the journey or the stage of the process. And you can also use it to generate epics and user stories that feed into your backlog. And that helps ensure that your development work remains connected to the user experience. You can also use it to track improvement and practice that principle of listening to users through an ongoing feedback and measurement loop. So there are some KPIs that we're used to tracking, like user satisfaction and trust, but you can also use your journey map to identify other potential indicators and metrics that are relevant to your particular work. And a helpful reference here that I think we can drop into the chat is section 280 of OMB Circular A11, which sets a baseline for customer experience in the public sector and is a good reference starting point for this. And of course, your map can and should continue to evolve as you redesign and improve parts of the journey. So as you do more research or as you redesign steps of the process, you can update your journey map accordingly to reflect that. And to share more on that, I'm going to hand it to Emily Reed, who's the chief of the Web Communications Branch for the USGS Water Mission area. Emily is going to share how they used journey mapping as an ongoing part of design and development. And this USGS work is also a great example of how a journey map can be really simple and low fidelity and still extremely useful for finding insights. Emily, over to you.
Thanks, Nora. So in our research, we were introduced to this concept of a user journey, and we actually mapped out our current user journey for finding and downloading water data from the USGS website. It didn't serve users very well. And prior to our collaboration with 18F, Nora and colleagues there, we really weren't using the concept of a user journey in practice. It wasn't part of our vocabulary or really part of our thinking. I do want to say, though, that we did have a ton of user stories that were describing this water data web application, but they were written primarily around one type of user, a hydrologist, which is a common user type within our agency. But despite having so many user stories, they were not connected by much of a logical flow. They were more associated with just different parts of the existing legacy application. So when we laid out the navigation step by step in this way, it helped us to see where users were getting stuck or getting confused, reaching dead ends, and that kind of thing. We also learned that we needed a refinement of users beyond professional title like hydrologists so that we could better understand why people took different paths through our site. And next slide, please. So we used the journey map to prioritize a first slice of work, which is shown in the blue box here. We decided to focus on a subsection of the journey that was related to users exploring and subsetting data. This section starts when users are at our website, waterdata.usgs.gov, and ends when they have found the data that they're looking for. This part of the journey was a source of pretty significant problems for finding data and using data available. And it was also an area that we found users lacked confidence in. So despite really having a strong trust in the data that they did find, when they eventually found data, they did not have confidence in themselves that they had found all the data that was actually available. And then other parts of the journey that are outside of that blue box, we're planning to work on in the future. And if you could advance the slide again, please, thank you. So as we began prototyping and testing, we identified different flows for different user goals, which are shown here based on what we observed during the user testing, and then updated and iterated the journey map to reflect these. So this map, as you can see, it is pretty simple as compared to some of the others that we've seen. It shows the ideal path that users could take. Some of the parts of this map that kind of point off to the side actually offboard users to other products within our portfolio that are designed for their specific needs. So one thing I want to say about this user journey is that it has been so helpful not only for us to clarify our own thinking and understanding of how users will accomplish their goals, but also to identify the minimum number of components that were needed in order for users to do so, which will allow us to reduce redundancy in this legacy system several times over. So it's just been really fantastic to have it. It's a really nice reference. Thanks, Nora.
Thank you. Great example. So just to wrap up a little, we covered a lot of ground pretty quickly, but this is just the tip of the iceberg, right? These are, again, really flexible tools. There's a ton of resources and examples out there if this has piqued your interest. We've pulled together a few here in the deck that we'll share out after. There's a list here with a bunch of links. And Aaron has helped put together one of the more robust government resources around this. So I'll just hand it back to him for a second to share about that.
Cool, thanks, Nora. So one of the things, part of the OMB's A11 Section 280 on having the 25 high impact service provider agencies, one of the things that they are do as a part of that mandate is to do customer understanding work. Journey mapping is one tool that an agency or group can use to understand customers, to do research and to document it into journey maps. And one of the things that they said, that this group said when, as a part of their assessments, is like, we just don't have enough capacity to do this. We don't know how to do it. We don't have the team to do it. We can't afford to hire somebody to do it for us. Like, we want to meet the mandates, but you know, we need a place to start. And so we developed a program for a sub-selection of these 25 high impact service provider agencies called Amplify, that was designed to sort of help teach them, you know, how to both do a little bit of like qualitative research and to do journey mapping was a part of that. So the important thing for you all to know is the work that we did in conjunction with the lab at OPM was to create a whole repository of materials that go into details on the topics listed here, which include you know, qualitative research, storytelling, and journey mapping. It's all available on OMB Max to use, so I encourage you to check it out. You know, steal, borrow, riff on it however you like, and use it for yourself, because it's a great trove of information. And again, happy to answer any questions about Amplified later.
Great, thanks, Aaron. All right, so big thanks to Aaron, Jacklynn, and Emily for joining to share their examples. We're going to hear some updates from Dan about the design system and then have time for Q&A after that. So Dan, back to you.
Thank you, Nora. I feel bad that now that I've changed this order around, I don't want to leave. There's so much that I want to follow up on, and we'll follow up on it really quickly as soon as I cover a little additional business, and we'll get right back to it. Because I think that this idea of really understanding a journey map and a service blueprint is a real key to like doing effective work, to understanding the work you have to do, to prioritize work, to understand the people who are using what you do, to understand where they're coming from and where they're going. And like, without that, it's so easy to get myopic, to get stuck in the weeds, to get focused on one little thing that's interesting to you or your team, and not have that better context to really keep moving forward. We'll get back to that very, very soon, while I cover some other important things, like a couple great new site launches that we've had over the last month. Just a couple of them, but I'm sure there'll be more very soon as time goes on. And first, I just wanted to call out allsorns.app.cloud.gov. The couple that we're showing today are kind of more like appy or dashboardy. This is a beta dashboard for the system of records notices. So a good way to search through records. And another one called dawson.ustaxcourt.gov, which is the U.S. Tax Court's electronic filing and case management system. Both of these are new and interesting ways to use the design system for something that's not a brochure site, something that's really an interactive tool to get information. So really great work. I'm sure we'll have many more great things to see in 2021. If you have a project that you'd like featured at a monthly call, you can give a shout out either in the chat right now or anytime in the public Slack as well, and we'll include it in the monthly roundup. I want to say a couple things about what's coming up for the design system over the next couple weeks. Right now, we're working on finishing design system 2.10.1, which is a bug fix for 2.10. This should be out in the next week. Big thing we're trying to address here is color contrast handling. 2.10 began to add a lot more support for automatically setting foreground text and link colors. And that's going to be really helpful, and we're working on improving that functionality and making it even tighter and even stronger going forward. So really, one of the things we're doing is working on better error handling. We want the design system to provide accessible contrast and do everything it can do to make accessible color combinations. But when it can't, and when there are things that teams need to do to adjust their settings to provide proper contrast for components, we want to make sure that the errors we show are helpful and descriptive as possible, and are focused on like getting the team back to work and getting to fix it, and not on like throwing an error that just like kills your compile and gets you frustrated. So we can fix that. And we're working to provide more predictable output for these automatic text and link color functions to better write better functions, to document the features better. We've learned some quirks, especially when using custom hex in your theme colors. And the next release will focus on making sure that everything really works as expected, no matter what colors you're using. And finally, we're getting back to work in earnest on our design system library update beta. We've been doing a lot of stuff, and we're making some improvements to how we organize our code under the hood to be more modular, to better support outside contributors, and better support the system going forward. So we'll have a new beta release of this work in about a week as well. And as Nora mentioned, we're getting ready to talk about our 2021 roadmap, which is really the big thing that we're working on. We've had a lot on our plate in 2020. We've learned a lot as well. Next month, we'll share more of what we learned, peeking a little bit more into some of our research, some of the journey map work that Nora showed, and then what we're doing to move forward into this new year. So yeah, it is new year, new administration, new start of 2021. Let's do this. And those are the design system updates. And now I can really just jump into the Q&A. So what I'm going to do is open up the chat and make sure that we've addressed anything that's in the chat, or bring up any new questions that we have to look at. So so Louis Blank asks, will the slides be available after the presentation? This is being recorded and posted to Digitalgov, so the whole presentation will be available. We also tried to post resources, links, and recaps into our public Slack as well. So so check out that. Check out things in the public Slack. I think this is also a good opportunity, coming off of a big topic like journey mapping, to use something like the public Slack to continue a conversation, because there's only so much that we can do here. What is the name of the public Slack channel? That's good. That's a good question. If you go to, where is it? It's USWDS public, but if you, what is it? There it is, chat.18f.gov. Always forget that. But if you go to chat.18f.gov, you can sign up for this public Slack, and that will get you into USWDS public. I know we've been migrating some of our Slack stuff over the last couple of weeks. There's maybe a couple new quirks in getting signed up. You might have to authenticate a little bit more often than you like, but you'll get in there, and I think it's a great place to ask more follow-up questions and get more resources as well. So let's see. Question about support being part of the journey. Can you expand on that? What beside, this is something that Kathy asks. Can you expand on support being part of the journey? What besides policy is considered support? So digging into the support level of the journey map a little bit, or the service blueprint a little bit. Can you speak to that?
You want me to take that one, Dan?
Sure. You'll answer it better than I can.
I can start and then open it to the rest of you. Yeah, I think, it might look a little bit different depending on your organization and what it is that you're focused on, exactly what you might include. But as part of that support layer, I would usually look at contracting processes and planning and budgeting processes, because we know that those are often places where there can be hurdles in starting to do more user-centered work or more agile software development. And it could include other administrative layers depending on your organization, compliance things or reporting, things like that, that are sort of behind the scenes things that aren't directly connected to the mission-oriented goal of your work. So that's maybe a good distinguisher for that support layer, is like they're not really connected directly to the mission-oriented aspect of the product or service that you're doing. They're shared at the division level or the agency level or above. Does that help, Kathy? Aaron or Dan or anyone, anything you want to add?
Sure, I can jump in. I think that there's definitely multiple layers of support that you need to do a project like this, and I think that you know there's the time and the resources to be able to do the work, and so there can be definitely a funding part. But sometimes depending on the organization they're in, like there may be just resistance to even doing this kind of work, and so this is where having support of leadership in some way can be really important and sometimes essential to even like open the path to do this kind of work. Going out and speaking directly with customers or people or the public to learn directly from them can be, can make people uncomfortable in a way. Like, what are you going to find? What are you going to share? Like, what's going to be on this map? And so I think that's a no cost way to get support for doing this kind of work, is to engage with leaders, and that'll help you through the project to get it started, and during, and to include them, and then afterwards with like ultimately like what do you do with a map. So definitely that, I think that layer is important. Yeah, and I'll stop there.
Yeah, maybe there's more that we could do from the design system side to point to resources or to make the case better for doing this kind of work, because I do think we want to make the case for this kind of work, and I think without doing this kind of work at all different levels, we're probably not doing our work as effectively as we could. So making the case for the why it's worth the time and the resources, why it's worth knowing that extra context to be able to even write the user stories that you need to develop issues, like to make that case at the right levels is something that I think we should continue to do, because we need to both be doing this with our projects and with Aaron's work. These are big, like cross agency sort of research projects. Like, those are things that you probably can't just do at every level of an organization. Like, you need a high level buy-in to get that going, but it's very very important. Let's see. Let's see. So there was a question earlier in the chat about what tools you use to create the journey maps, and I think you can do them in a lot of different things. There's all kinds of, if you can make a square and make a line, you can make a journey map. You can see like you can make them in things like Photoshop or InDesign or Sketch or Miro or Mural, or just like on a board with a sticky and a Sharpie and a way to take a picture. I think the big thing really is just being able to write something down, to be able to organize and to draw some lines. And as long as you can do those things, you can make one of these. Yeah. So and I see also that in the chat there's some more resources that we pointed to on performance.gov that describe the process and the steps that Aaron and his team followed to gather the information that created those veterans journey maps. And there's a link that's there at performance.gov / I'm not going to go through this link, but scroll back up in the chat. You can see some more resources around what they did and how they did it. A question from Simona, which is, what are the new USWDS sites using for their search? And I don't know. I know that I use search.gov for USWDS, and I think that is a great solution for pretty much everyone. I'm not sure exactly what they're using on these sites, but search.gov is the first place I'd look if I were doing search. Let's see. Oh, and there's a question from Claudia around whether there's a human-centered design playbook that includes the topics covered here. And sort of. We pointed to to the resources with the 18F method cards, which are not an explicit playbook, but rather a collection of things that teams can do in the service of human-centered design. That's a great place to start. And I think there was another link that might have been at performance. Yeah, so Aaron posted a link that's also at performance.gov to as a playbook for the discovery phase of human-centered design. But yeah, I think there's a real opportunity here to begin to collect some of these tools and to really promote some of these tools. I think that the design system, as much as anything, is a vehicle for helping teams really work in the service of human-centered design. So I would like to work to improve like the way that we're able to link out, the way that we're able to provide human-centered design resources, because we're not just doing this to build websites and can get components on a page. We're doing this for a reason, and the more that we can point to the resources that are around research and design resources, the better. Yeah, so it seems like there's some questions that are largely around differentiating between backstage and support. Michelle asks, you know, how do you distinguish between backstage and support? Like, where do tech services go? Is it important to always have a bright line between backstage and support?
I think not always important to have a super bright line. I would say, especially if you're fairly new to this, is like don't get too hung up on those distinctions, and instead focus on trying to get out visually what is connected to the product or service that you're working on. And then as you do more research, it often becomes easier to separate those things out into layers. Like, it's quite possible that some aspects of your tech stack and services are backstage processes and some are maybe support. But really, I think we don't let that be a barrier to the value of just getting those things on a page and a place where you can look at them and talk to other people about them.
One more question here from Neil. Is there a particular success story of using these customer experience methods that's resonated with stakeholders to bring them along? Like, for instance, the veterans employment. Has that worked? Making the case. What are good ways to make the case?
I can pick up on that a little bit. Again, kind of building off of the veterans employment map. There was actually a precursor to that map that was done at VA, at the Department of Veterans Affairs, that was looking at the end-to-end experience that veterans have engaging with that agency from the time they finish service to end of life. And it had never been done before, and it was rooted in talking directly with veterans, and they produced a map. I'll see if I can track down a link to share directly to that map, but it's an outstanding example. And that map like opened up for people at all levels of that agency, from the secretary on down to nurses at like medical centers, like what the experience is that veterans have, and like where their moments that matter are, and like where their key pain points are, and just like where there's connections and where there's gaps. And that really like changed the way that the agency thinks about the holistic experience. And it set up the foundation for the Veterans Experience Office, which the Veterans Employment Map was born out of. And so that really was a transformational project. And people still talk about that map as being informative, but also like emblematic for that change in thinking about putting the veteran at the center of how the agency operates. So that's a tremendous success story from that map and the project that was the foundation for it.
Great, thank you, Aaron. Looks like we're out of time right now, but I really wanted to thank Nora and Aaron and Jacklyn and Emily for being here today to talk about this important subject. I hope we'll have more to say about this in the future because there's still a lot to work through here. But thank you all for taking the time to talk with us today. I just want to finish it up by saying that next month we will be talking about the Design System 2021 roadmap. And as always, I encourage you to join that community at USWDS Public using that chat.18f.gov link that we posted earlier. And then also follow along with what we're doing at GitHub. Go to our website, and if you have questions, whether it's about anything, whether it's just signing into Slack, uswds@support.digitalgov.gov is the email. Happy 2021. Gosh, that's a big number. I'm looking forward to this year. Looking forward to seeing y'all later. Bye-bye.